The phone call came on a quiet afternoon. It was just another one of those days when the sun shone brightly through the kitchen window, and I was sorting through old papers, doing what I had done for the past 12 years, taking care of everything my husband had left behind. His sudden death all those years ago left me feeling lost, but I promised myself I would keep going. Every month I transferred $700 to the bank, convinced that I was paying off his debts. It was something I had done without question, something I felt was my responsibility. It was the least I could do after everything we had been through. But then that call came. It was the bank. I had expected it to be just another reminder of my payments or a question about something minor, but the woman on the other end of the line wasn't like the usual customer service representatives I'd spoken to. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, like she was reading from a script. "Miss, your husband never had any debts," she said. I froze, my hand shook as I held the phone to my ear, struggling to understand what she was saying. "What do you mean, are you sure? I've been paying every month for over a decade." I felt my voice rise, the confusion and panic creeping in. My heart raced in my chest as I tried to make sense of her words. "Miss, the records here show no outstanding debts in your husband's name. No loans, no credit cards, no bills overdue. Nothing," the woman explained. I couldn't believe it. The money I had been sending out month after month, year after year, was for nothing. How could that be possible? How could I have been so wrong all this time? I thought back to those early days after my husband's passing. The shock, the grief, the pain. I had been desperate to hold on to something, anything, to make sense of the chaos that had upturned my life. The debts, the paperwork, surely they had been real. They had to have been. But now, suddenly, everything was called into question. The woman on the other end of the line patiently told me that they would look into it further, but I was already too far gone. I needed answers. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of disbelief settle on me. There was something deeper at play here. This wasn't just a simple mistake. Something didn't add up. I had been paying off what I thought were my husband's debts, but now I had to wonder, had I been misled all this time? I could hardly breathe as I sat there, the phone still in my hand. The quiet of the house felt suffocating. I was alone now, but not in the way I had always been. This was different. It was as if something hidden was finally being revealed, something I wasn't prepared to see. I stood up from the chair and walked toward the window, looking out at the small garden I had lovingly tended to over the years. I thought of my husband, of the life we had shared, and of all the promises I had made to myself when he was gone. But now this new truth hung in the air, casting a shadow over everything. How could I have been so blind? I reached for the phone again, dialing a number I had never thought I would need. This wasn't just about paying off debts anymore. I needed to know the truth, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might find. The room felt colder as I waited for the next step, for the answers that would come. What had my husband been hiding? Why had I been paying for debts that didn't exist? And most importantly, what had happened to the life I thought I understood so well? The woman's words echoed in my mind. "Your husband never had any debts." That line would follow me for the rest of the day, and I knew deep down that it would lead me into a place I wasn't prepared to go. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't shake the thought of that phone call. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my husband's face, his smile, the way he would hold me close after a long day. But now everything felt different. The foundation of my life, the trust I had built in our marriage, seemed to crumble with every passing hour. How could I have missed it? Was I so caught up in my grief that I couldn't see the truth? I spent hours going through the old papers, the ones I had stored in the attic, the ones my husband had left behind. I didn't know what I was looking for, but something told me I had to keep searching. Maybe there was a clue hidden somewhere, a sign I had overlooked. I didn't want to admit it, but the deeper I dug, the more I began to feel like I was chasing shadows. There were no records of debts, no papers with his name on them except for the usual bills and statements we'd paid together. But none of it matched the amount I had been sending to the bank. I thought back to the months after his death. The funeral was a blur, a whirlwind of emotions, but after that it was as if I had to pick up the pieces of a shattered life and put them back together. I focused on the things I knew, paying the bills, handling the finances, keeping everything running. He had always been the one to take care of those things, but after he passed it all fell to me, and I did what I thought I had to do. I paid the bills, I made sure everything was taken care of. I made sure we kept the house, kept the memories. But now everything I had done seemed pointless. If my husband had no debts, why had I been paying them off for all these years? The bank's mistake, or something more? The phone call from the bank had left me shaken, but it also sparked something inside me. I had to get answers, so I called them back. This time I didn't hang up until I had a clear picture of what had happened. "Can you explain the records in more detail?" I asked the bank representative, trying to sound calm, though my voice wavered with uncertainty. "We've looked through everything, miss, and there are no records of any debts associated with your husband's name. No credit cards, loans, or outstanding bills," the woman on the other end replied. "But I've been making monthly payments for 12 years. Where is the money going?" I felt a sense of panic creeping in. The confusion was turning into something worse, fear. "Are you sure there's no way this is a mistake?" "We are sure. Your husband did not have any debts with us," the representative confirmed. I set the phone down and stared at the wall, trying to process what she had said. The woman had been polite, kind even, but the weight of her words hung heavily in the air. If the debts weren't real, then what had I been paying for all these years? Who had been collecting the money? Who was behind this? It felt like a sick joke, one that I was caught in the middle of. And yet I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. My husband had been an honest man. He had always taken care of us. He wouldn't have lied to me, right? But the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. The secret accounts, the late-night phone calls he would take in another room. The strange texts I'd found on his phone that he quickly erased. Could all of it have been pointing to something I hadn't understood? Had he been hiding something from me all along? Something far bigger than I could have imagined? I decided then that I would find the truth. I couldn't let this mystery go unsolved, so I made plans to visit the bank in person. I needed to see the records myself. I needed to understand how all of this had happened. What if there was someone else involved? Someone who had taken advantage of my trust, my love for my husband? The thought made my stomach turn, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. The next morning I dressed in the same simple outfit I always wore, a pair of slacks, a blouse, and a cardigan. I felt like I was walking into a storm, but I couldn't back out now. My curiosity, my need for answers, pushed me forward. I left the house, the walls closing in around me as I stepped outside, not knowing what I would find but determined to uncover the truth. As I approached the bank, I felt a mixture of anger and fear. What if they told me something I didn't want to hear? What if the answers were worse than I imagined? My hands trembled as I walked through the door, and the cool air of the bank hit me as I stood in line, waiting for my turn. I kept repeating to myself that I needed to be strong. I had to stay calm, but deep down I knew that whatever I learned today would change everything. Finally, my turn came. I stepped up to the counter, and the bank teller greeted me with a smile, her face friendly but distant. "Hello, miss, how can I help you today?" she asked. "I need to see the records for my husband. I've been paying off his debts for years, and I was told there's no record of any debts," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding in my chest. The teller nodded and asked for some of my husband's details. She typed into the computer for a moment before turning back to me. "Give me just a moment," she said. "I'll print the details for you." As I waited, my mind raced with questions. What could I expect? What if I found out something I didn't want to know? When the teller returned, she handed me a stack of papers. I looked down at them, scanning the pages. There was nothing, not a single trace of what I had been paying for. No loans, no outstanding bills, nothing. But then a small note caught my eye, something written in the margin. It was the name of a company, a name I didn't recognize. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind racing. What was this? Was it another clue? My hands shook as I reached for my phone to write it down. I had to get to the bottom of this. There was no turning back now. I had opened a door and there was no telling what I would find on the other side. The next few days were filled with questions that had no answers. The name on the paper, the one I had written down, Marlowe Enterprises, echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. Who were they? What did they have to do with my husband? And why had I never heard of them before? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I truly knew about my husband's life. I had trusted him completely, and yet here I was, standing on the edge of a secret I didn't want to face. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to investigate this company, even if it meant stepping into dangerous waters. The name didn't seem familiar to me, but maybe it was something he had kept hidden for a reason. My gut told me there was more to the story, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that something dark was lurking beneath the surface. I spent hours online, searching for any information on Marlowe Enterprises. I found a website, but it looked professional, too professional. It was clean, slick, and almost too perfect. There were no red flags, no obvious signs of anything wrong, but I wasn't fooled. I called the number listed on their website and asked to speak to someone who could give me more information. To my surprise, a man answered the phone almost immediately. His voice was smooth, calm, and reassuring. "Hello, this is Richard Walker with Marlowe Enterprises. How can I assist you today?" "Hello, Mr. Walker," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for information about your company. I recently came across your name in some old records, and I need to know what connection you have to my late husband, Jacob Weston." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the man processing my words. My heart raced in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the silence made me uneasy. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand," Mr. Walker finally said, his voice still calm but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Your husband, you say he's passed away?" "Yes," I replied, my voice growing firmer. "But why was his name connected to your company? What business did he have with you? Why didn't he tell me about this?" The line went quiet again. The seconds ticked by like hours, and I could feel the tension building in my chest. I knew something was off, I just didn't know what yet. "I believe there's been some misunderstanding, Miss Weston," Mr. Walker said, his tone suddenly more distant. "I'm afraid I can't provide that information, it's confidential." "Confidential?" I asked, trying to keep the disbelief out of my voice. "I've been paying off debts for 12 years, and now you're telling me that you have no record of my husband's dealings with your company. What's going on, Mr. Walker?" His response came quickly, almost too quickly. "I'm sorry, Miss Weston, but I can't help you with that. You'll have to take it up with someone else." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. Something wasn't right. The man's refusal to speak was a red flag, and the way he had brushed me off so easily only made me more determined to find the truth. I couldn't let this go, I wouldn't let it. So I did what I knew best. I went back to the bank. I had to get answers. They couldn't just tell me there were no records and leave me in the dark. Someone was hiding something, but who and why? The next day I arrived at the bank with the papers in my hand, the same papers that had started this whole mess. I approached the same teller who had helped me earlier, my mind racing with questions. She recognized me immediately. "Miss Weston," she said, her voice still polite. "Back again." "Yes," I said firmly, placing the papers on the counter. "I need to know more. There's something wrong here. My husband's debts were never real, and now I've come across this company, Marlowe Enterprises. What can you tell me about them? What connection do they have to my husband?" The teller looked down at the papers for a moment, her fingers tapping nervously on the counter. She was quiet for a moment, and I could sense that she was trying to figure out how much she could reveal. Finally, she sighed and looked up at me. Her expression softer now, like she was trying to convey something without saying it aloud. "Miss Weston," she said quietly, "I can't tell you everything, but I can give you one thing. Marlowe Enterprises isn't just a company, it's a front." My heart skipped a beat. A front, what did that mean? "Excuse me," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The name Marlowe Enterprises is registered in several places," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's not what it seems. It's connected to some very powerful people. People who don't want to be found. Your husband, well, he got involved with them somehow. But I can't say more than that. If you want answers, you'll need to dig deeper. But be careful." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "I didn't know how to," she said, looking away. "I didn't want to get involved. I'm just doing my job, Miss Weston. But you need to understand this is bigger than you realize." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My head spun as I tried to make sense of what she had said. A front, powerful people. What had my husband gotten himself into? And why had he kept it all hidden from me? I felt like I was on the edge of something, standing at the precipice of a deep, dark secret that I wasn't prepared to face. But now I had no choice. I had to keep going. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it. I stood up, my legs shaky from the intensity of the conversation. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. "I'll figure this out, I have to." As I left the bank, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just taken the first step into a world I wasn't ready for. But there was no going back now. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and determination. The more I uncovered, the deeper the hole seemed to grow. The teller's cryptic words haunted me. Marlowe Enterprises is a front asterisk. What did she mean by that? And why did my husband have any connection to them? I had to know more, but as the days passed, I felt the weight of this investigation pushing down on me. I was in too deep to stop now, but part of me wished I could turn back. I decided to follow the only lead I had, the name Marlowe Enterprises. I went to the library scouring old newspapers and magazines for any mention of the company. I found nothing. It was as though the company had been scrubbed from every record. There were no articles, no reports, no trace of their dealings. This wasn't just about paying off some debts. This was about something much darker. But the more I searched, the more I realized how little I knew about my own life. What had Jacob been involved in? What could have been so dangerous that he kept it all a secret? My mind raced as I paced the small apartment we had shared. I tried to imagine what it was like for him, keeping this part of his life hidden. I had always thought I knew him inside and out. We had shared everything, our hopes, our dreams, our fears. But now it felt like I had never truly known him at all. The man I had loved had been keeping secrets, secrets so deep that they were leading me down this terrifying path. I tried to stay calm, but the fear was growing. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it seemed. Something told me I wasn't just dealing with an unpaid debt anymore. This was bigger. The name Marlowe Enterprises felt like a key to a locked door I wasn't sure I wanted to open, but I had to. I thought back to the papers I had found in the attic, the ones I had painstakingly sorted through. I went over them again, desperately looking for a clue I had missed, and there it was, tucked in a corner of one of the old envelopes. A phone number written in my husband's handwriting. It was on the back of an old business card. I hadn't seen it before. Why had he hidden this from me? I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling as I dialed the number. It rang twice before a man picked up. "Hello," he answered in a low voice. I hesitated for a moment. "Is this Marlowe Enterprises?" I asked, trying to sound confident, though my heart was pounding in my chest. There was a pause and I could feel the tension rise. "Who is this?" the man asked, his tone sharp. "My name is Lisa Weston," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm trying to find out more about your company. My husband, Jacob Weston, had dealings with you before he passed away. Can you help me?" The line went silent for a long moment. My stomach churned as I waited for a response. Finally, the man spoke again, his voice colder this time. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I think you have the wrong number." "No," I said quickly, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is the number on a business card my husband had. It's the only lead I have. I need to know what happened. What did my husband get involved in?" Another long silence stretched between us. My frustration was mounting, but I held on. I couldn't let this slip away. "I'm afraid I can't help you," the man said finally, his voice colder than before. "If you want to know about Marlowe Enterprises, you're going to have to look elsewhere." And with that, the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind racing. I had been so close. The phone number, the business card, it was all connected. But now it was slipping away. I could feel the pieces of the puzzle slowly slipping through my fingers. The more I tried to grasp them, the more elusive they became. I wasn't going to give up, though. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to stop now. If the man on the other end of the phone was trying to scare me off, it was only making me more determined. The next morning I drove to the address listed on the business card. I knew it was a risk, but it was the only option left. The office was located on a quiet street, tucked away behind a tall, wrought iron gate. The building was nondescript, plain even, but there was something unsettling about it. It looked like it belonged to someone who didn't want to be found. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, staring at the building. Should I go inside? Should I knock on the door and demand answers? My mind was a whirl of conflicting thoughts. But one thing was clear, I had come too far to turn back now. I had to know what was behind those walls. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked across the street. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the entrance. I reached for the doorbell, but before I could press it, the door opened. A woman, dressed in a sharp suit, stood in the doorway. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yes," she asked, her tone businesslike but cold. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for information about Marlowe Enterprises," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My husband had dealings with your company, and I need to know what happened." The woman's eyes narrowed. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at me, sizing me up. Then, without a word, she stepped back and motioned for me to come inside. I hesitated for a moment, but then something inside me pushed me forward. I had to know. This was my only chance. I stepped into the building, and the door clicked shut behind me. The door shut behind me with a soft click, and for a moment I was enveloped in the quiet darkness of the room. The woman who had let me in didn't speak. She simply led me down a long hallway, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. I followed her without a word, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though I was walking deeper into a world I wasn't meant to be part of. Finally, we arrived at a small office, dimly lit by a single desk lamp. The woman motioned for me to sit in the chair opposite the desk, and I did so, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the seat. She didn't sit down immediately. Instead, she stood by the window, her back to me as she gazed out at the city beyond. The silence between us was suffocating. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice low and controlled. "Whatever you think you know, you don't." "I know enough," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I know my husband was involved with your company. I know I've been paying off debts for 12 years, debts that don't even exist. I know there's something you're hiding, and I need to know what it is." The woman turned to face me, her eyes cold and calculating. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look guilty. She just looked like someone who had seen too many people like me walk through that door, desperate for answers they didn't want to hear. "You don't want to know the truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What you think you've been doing all these years, it wasn't for nothing, but it wasn't for the reasons you think either." I leaned forward in my chair, my breath catching in my throat. "What does that mean? What are you saying?" She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. For the first time I saw a flicker of something in them, regret maybe, or a glimmer of something deeper, but she didn't speak for a long time. It was as if she was weighing whether or not to tell me the truth, or if it was even worth it. Finally she spoke. "Your husband, Jacob, wasn't paying off debts. He was making payments to protect you, to protect both of you." I blinked, stunned. "Protect me from what?" "From them," she replied, her voice almost too quiet to hear. "Marlowe Enterprises isn't just a company, it's a network of people in powerful positions, involved in things that no one should ever know about. Jacob got caught up in it. He tried to get out, but it wasn't that simple." I sat there, my mind spinning, trying to process her words. But why didn't he tell me? Why did he keep this from me? Why was I paying money for something I didn't even know existed? "The people Jacob was dealing with, they're dangerous," she said, her voice firm. "He didn't want you involved. He didn't want you to know. He thought if he kept you in the dark, he could keep you safe. And he did. As long as you kept paying, they left you alone. But the moment you stopped, well, you saw the phone call from the bank. You've been asking questions, digging where you shouldn't. They're watching you now." A cold shiver ran down my spine. But the debts, what about the debts? What was I paying for? "The payments weren't for debts," she explained, her voice growing softer. "They were protection money. Every month the money you sent went to keep you safe. It wasn't a loan, it wasn't a bill. It was the price for silence, for safety, for keeping you away from the truth. The moment you stopped paying, they would have come after you, and it would have been too late by then." I felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me. All these years, all the money, the struggle, the endless payments, had it all been a lie? Had I been paying for something I didn't understand, something that Jacob had kept from me to protect me? "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why didn't he just tell me? Why did he leave me in the dark?" "He didn't want to lose you," the woman said softly. "He thought he could protect you by keeping you out of it, but he couldn't. And now the people who were pulling the strings, they're coming for you. They always do." Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I felt my chest tighten, my thoughts racing. My husband, the man I had trusted with everything, had been living a double life. He had been hiding from something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And now, it seemed that the truth had caught up to me. For a moment we both sat in silence. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, the pounding of blood in my ears. The woman who had started all of this by letting me in now stood up and walked to the door. "If you want to survive this," she said, pausing before opening the door, "you need to leave. Leave now. Forget everything you've learned. Because if you don't, if you keep digging, you won't make it out of this alive." I sat there, frozen, as the weight of her words settled in. She didn't look back as she opened the door, but her warning was clear. There was no going back from this, no way to undo the damage. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. I had no answers, no closure, only a terrifying glimpse into a world I wasn't prepared for. And yet, even as the door closed behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life would never be the same again. The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for me to uncover it, but now I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it. I walked out of the office, and as I stepped into the bright sunlight, I knew one thing for sure: there was no going back. The life I had known was gone, and I was about to step into a world of darkness and danger I had never imagined. But one thing was certain: I would fight to the end to find the truth, no matter where it led me.